Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 11 important articles. Today we have a lot of articles that are relevant for the exam. There are 9 articles which can be useful both for prelims and mains, and they require a detailed analysis. And we have few small articles that are important for the prelims exam. So this is an attempt to ensure that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. It's an attempt to simplify your current affairs preparation. If you guys are benefiting from the initiative, do support us with your likes and comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Now before we start, we have a very important announcement. Every Saturday, we conduct a weekly prelims practice test called SIP, Success in Prelims. This test is conducted on the Unacademy platform, and it gives you an opportunity to attempt 30 MCQs based on current affairs of the last week in a duration of 1 hour. So this test goes live every Saturday at 8 p.m. on the Unacademy app. All you have to do is to click on the link provided in the video description and register and enroll for the test, and ensure that you practice as many prelims questions as possible before the exam. So do make use of this initiative. Now let's start with the discussion by looking at an important column on page number 10 that is related to disaster management. As you all know, recently, Kerala was hit by a devastating disaster. In the Wayanad region of Western Ghats, deadly landslides wiped out entire villages, killing hundreds of people. So this highlights the disaster vulnerability of the state of Kerala. In fact, over the last few years, Kerala has become more prone and susceptible to such deadly disasters. Kerala has been affected by cyclones and even deadly floods apart from these landslides. So the focus of this article is on Kerala's vulnerability. How we can tackle the vulnerability of Kerala with regard to natural disasters, and how we can focus on disaster risk reduction. So let's understand this topic in detail. See, Kerala was generally considered as a risk-free state. Some decades ago, Kerala wouldn't witness major disasters as such. Of course, every now and then there would be some disaster or the other, but in general, Kerala was seen as a relatively risk-free state compared to other highly prone vulnerable states. But over the years, Kerala has become more susceptible, more prone to deadly disasters. These disasters which would occur previously, their impact was minimal. The loss of human lives, the loss to property and infrastructure was minimal. But in the last 15 to 20 years, these losses occurring in Kerala because of these disasters has gone up exponentially. Be it the number of deaths and injuries being reported, or be it the damage caused to public infrastructure and private property, and even the damage being caused to the environment because of these disasters. So the impact of the disasters has gone up exponentially, which makes Kerala today one of the most vulnerable and disaster-prone states in the country. See, please understand that the increase in human activities, or as we call anthropogenic activities, has played a very big role in increasing the disaster risk for the state of Kerala. The hazards were already present. Natural hazards are not under our control, be it heavy rainfall or cyclones or even floods and landslides which occur naturally. These are naturally occurring hazards which is beyond human control. But man-made factors introduced through anthropogenic activities, that is human activities, has aggravated the risk multiple times. First of all, we have global warming and climate change. In a changing climate, extreme weather events are becoming more frequent, more intense, leading to deadly disasters. So there is definitely the angle of climate change, global warming playing a role in increasing the frequency of extreme weather events. Along with that, the anthropogenic factors on the ground in the state of Kerala has contributed to the increased risk as far as disaster vulnerability is concerned in the state of Kerala. So Kerala has a very dense population. If you look at the geography of Kerala, both physical and human geography, Kerala has three distinct geographic zones. It has a coastal plain which lies next to the Arabian Sea. It has the mighty Western Ghats, and it also has these wetlands and water bodies and lakes. So these three distinct geographic zones in Kerala, all of them are densely populated today. In fact, Kerala is probably the only state in India where you have a major population present right along the coastline. Human settlements have come up right along the coastline. And even in the Western Ghats, even in the slopes of the Western Ghats, large-scale human activities have come up, from agriculture to industrial activities to urbanization to economic activities. This increase in human activities and human settlements has a direct role to play with regard to Kerala's disaster vulnerability. Because there has been encroachment of land, sensitive ecosystems have been destroyed and damaged due to large-scale illegal encroachment because of human settlements and urbanization. So this represents the unique risk that Kerala faces. So the disaster we saw in Wayanad just a couple of months ago is not a one-off incident. This is a repeating pattern that we have seen over the last 2 decades. Hence, the writers are focusing on how we can help Kerala to deal with disaster risk, how we can manage the vulnerability and ensure we focus on disaster risk reduction, which is a priority under the Sendai framework brought out through the United Nations. The Sendai framework on disaster risk reduction prioritizes the concept of disaster risk reduction. So to reduce the risk associated with a disaster, one important concept is to understand vulnerability. That is, you need to understand how susceptible is a particular place with regard to these hazards. You need to develop early warning systems, forecasting systems. You need to develop customized local maps, hazard maps and vulnerability maps to get a view about, or to get an idea about the susceptibility of a region. So based on this understanding, you need to prepare. You need to take preventive and mitigative measures which can help in minimizing the impact of a disaster. This is part of the disaster management cycle. In the disaster management cycle, you have 3 phases: pre-disaster, during disaster and post-disaster. So in these 3 phases of disaster management, pre-disaster becomes very, very crucial. Of course, during disaster response and relief, the emergency operations which are carried out, and the post-disaster recovery and reconstruction and rehabilitation, they are also important. But before that, pre-disaster phase, which involves planning, preparedness, is very crucial in order to prevent and mitigate the impact of these disasters. So if you have to focus on prevention and mitigation, you need early warning. You need to understand the vulnerability, the susceptibility of a particular place. You need to understand the mechanisms, the dynamics involved in the disaster which is occurring in some parts of the country. So to understand the dynamics of landslides and even floods in Kerala, the writers are calling upon the concerned stakeholders to focus on landslide susceptibility mapping at the grassroots level, at the local level. Now, if you look at the geography of Kerala, especially the Wayanad region, it has a very distinct, unique geography. The Wayanad region of Western Ghats, it touches the Mysore plateau and extends towards the Deccan plateau. So this is a very unique tectonic and seismic region. Even though it's not tectonically very active, right? It's not prone to earthquakes as such, but the seismic profile of this region, the Wayanad Mysore plateau, is so unique that even though the plateau is tilted towards the east, the rivers that originate on the eastern slopes of Western Ghats, they flow towards the Arabian Sea, towards the west. So this unique geology has to be understood. The soil profile, the slope structure has to be better understood in order to map the vulnerability of Kerala. This is the focus of the article. The writers are asking the authorities, the concerned stakeholders, to focus on susceptibility mapping at the local level, at the level of each district, each village, so that you can better understand the geological factors which are at play. Because see, generally when landslides occur, they are often directly linked with extreme rainfall, right, or cloudburst events. But this is a very limited understanding of landslides. Heavy rainfall or even floods and cloudbursts, they are only the triggering factors. They are the immediate triggers causing a landslide. Beyond the immediate trigger, there could be other root causes which is linked to the geology of the place, which is linked to the slope structure and the soil profile of that particular place. So understanding all these geological factors through a scientific approach is very crucial, and this can be documented in a susceptibility map or a vulnerability map. Now, in the case of India, we have already undertaken such efforts. When it comes to managing landslides, we have already focused on creating a vulnerability map for the country, and susceptibility mapping is also being undertaken. The primary purpose of such exercises is to understand the geology of a place, to understand the various factors which are at play. There could be climatic factors, geological factors, and factors driven by human activities as well. And a combination of this is what creates vulnerability. This is what leads eventually to a disaster. So understanding the lithology, the rock composition, and the mechanical properties of the slope, the thickness of the soil, the presence of vegetation on a slope, and documenting all these parameters on a map is very crucial in disaster management. Similarly, you need to take into account the human activities which is altering the slope, which makes it more prone to landslides. It could be unregulated large-scale agricultural activities, or over-tourism, or encroachment of forest land, or industrialization and uncontrolled urbanization. These human activities, which includes infrastructure projects like road construction or even mining projects, etc., which makes the slope more vulnerable to landslides, they have to be well documented at the local level. So this requires a scientific approach, and India has already put in some effort in this regard. ISRO, for example, has used satellite resources, and it has brought out the landslide atlas of India. So it has created a nationwide atlas to point out the vulnerable regions as far as landslides are concerned. So if you look at the Himalayan belt from Uttarakhand towards Himachal Pradesh and Jammu and Kashmir, extending to Ladakh, and even Sikkim and parts of northeast India towards Arunachal Pradesh and Nagaland, the entire region is highly prone to landslides. Similarly, Western Ghats is very prone to landslides. So this is well documented through the landslide atlas of India brought out by ISRO. The National Remote Sensing Center of ISRO has brought out this atlas. Then Geological Survey of India is working on a national landslide susceptibility mapping program. It is bringing out a national landslide susceptibility map by relying on geological evidence. If ISRO has brought out the landslide atlas by using satellite resources through satellite based observation and mapping, the Geological Survey of India is relying on geological data about the tectonic activity, the slope structure, the soil profile, the lithology. These parameters are being factored in by the Geological Survey of India to develop the national landslide susceptibility mapping. But one concern is that these maps, which are nationwide vulnerability maps, they are not localized enough. They don't provide sufficient local data. At the level of each village, at the level of each slope and mountain range, sufficient data is not provided through these vulnerability profiles. So that is why the writers are urging the state and the center to work together to focus on more localized reports, which could be more useful in providing alerts especially during the monsoon season, because Kerala becomes prone to landslides and even floods primarily during the monsoons. It's usually these areas, the slopy areas of Western Ghats, present on the margins of water bodies and rivers, which become prone to these hydrological disasters. So if we have a better understanding of the vulnerability at the local level, and if we can monitor the immediate triggers like heavy rainfall, cloudbursts, etc., then there can be early warning which can be provided that can help in timely evacuation of the people who are in the line of risk. This is the entire focus of the article. Because see, the Arabian Sea has already started showing clear signs of the impact of global warming. Studies have established that the western part of Indian Ocean region, which includes our Arabian Sea, it is already recording a significantly higher sea surface temperature, especially during the summer months. Studies have established that the sea surface temperature in the Arabian Sea has gone up by almost 1.2 degrees Celsius. This is seen across the Western Indian Ocean. This directly contributes to cyclogenesis. It creates a very positive environment for intense cyclonic activity over the sea, which determines extreme weather like cyclones and heavy rainfall and cloudbursts, which eventually translates into floods and later landslides. So keeping this in mind, we should note that the window available in Kerala to operate at a safe level has been declining consistently. In fact, there is an indicator called the Safe Operating Space, which has been developed by the Stockholm Resilience Center. Since climate change is posing an increased risk for human settlements around the world, leading to more disasters, this research institution, the Stockholm Resilience Center, that focuses on environmental science and disaster management, has introduced a concept called Safe Operating Space. Through studies, they establish the window which is available within which the communities in a particular region are safe from disasters. And according to this report by the Stockholm Resilience Center, the safe operating space in Kerala is shrinking year by year. The window available is shrinking, meaning the risk is increasing, the vulnerability is going up. So climate change definitely has a role to play with increased cyclogenesis. It's likely that Kerala will witness more intense rainfalls during monsoons. So to be prepared for more floods and landslides, Kerala needs susceptibility mapping at the local level. There needs to be a more holistic approach to understand the mechanics involved in triggering landslides. It's not just rainfall or floods which is triggering landslides. Those are only the immediate triggers. There are other causative factors which needs to be studied thoroughly, especially the geological factors. So this calls for a paradigm shift in disaster management. See, if you look at the period before 1990s, around the world, governments were only reacting to disasters. There was no holistic approach to disaster management. Before 1990s, governments never prioritized disaster management around the world except for few countries. There was no holistic approach, no focus on early warning, preparedness, planning, and definitely there was no focus on post-disaster management. So only when a disaster occurred, governments would react to it, they would respond to it, they would treat this as an ad hoc contingency, as an ad hoc crisis. They would give some basic relief and then everybody would forget about the disaster. So the long-term impact was never considered. The need for planning and preparedness was not considered prior to 1990s. But then, through the leadership of United Nations and Japan, as Japan is one of the most disaster-prone countries in the world, Japan started hosting these UN conferences on disaster management. Starting from 1990s all the way till 2015, we saw a major transformation happen at the global level in the field of disaster management. First, Japan hosted the Yokohama conference that led to the Yokohama strategy back in 1990s. For the first time, we had a global framework for disaster management. It introduced the concept of disaster management cycle, and recognized the three phases of disaster management, which includes pre-disaster, during disaster and post-disaster. Then a decade later, Japan hosted the Hyogo conference that led to the Hyogo framework, which was an improved version of the Yokohama framework. Now, the current global framework for disaster management is the Sendai framework, adopted in 2015 following the Sendai conference in Japan. The Sendai framework prioritizes the concept of disaster risk reduction. So, we have definitely seen a big shift, a big transformation in the field of disaster management over the last 3 decades. India also has gone through this transformation. India adopted the Disaster Management Act in 2005, and we have adopted the goals and standards laid down by the UN framework. We are fully compliant with the Sendai goals, which are recognized. We have inculcated them into our National Disaster Management Policy and Plan, which has been adopted with the National Disaster Management Authority. So, definitely we have seen a big transformation happen in disaster management. Governments have become more proactive compared to the earlier reactive approach. But still there is a shortcoming, according to the writers. See, if you look at the DM cycle, which I mentioned earlier, if you look at the 3 phases of the disaster management cycle, we have the pre-disaster phase, during disaster phase and post-disaster phase. As of now, governments are more focused on during disaster and post-disaster, according to the writers. To be fair, to look at the counter argument, governments focus on pre-disaster as well, especially early warning, planning and preparedness. The idea is to prevent and mitigate a disaster, to reduce the disaster risk. But writers believe that, especially when it comes to landslides and floods in Kerala, there isn't enough focus on pre-disaster planning and preparedness, especially to understand the vulnerability at the local level. They are saying that governments have become more focused on the during disaster phase, where emergency response and relief is provided. They focus on post-disaster management to reconstruct and rehabilitate the affected area. But adequate focus is not present at the local level when it comes to pre-disaster planning, early warning and preparedness. This is what the writers feel as far as Kerala's vulnerability is concerned. So, they are urging the government and the disaster management authorities, both at the state and central level, to focus on local susceptibility mapping, to understand the vulnerability better through a scientific approach, so that we can prevent and mitigate these disasters with sufficient early warning. So, that is what we learn from this important article. So, please take up a practice question. A paradigm shift in disaster risk reduction has become necessary in Kerala given the state's high vulnerability to disasters. Discuss. So, I expect you guys to write an answer to this question based on what we have discussed. I have given you all the important points with the right structure and the flow. You just have to organize those points into an introduction, a body and a conclusion. So, let us see how many of you can do this. Next, on page number 8, we have a related article. There is an article related to the Wayanad landslides. But this article focuses on disaster financing. How disasters are financed? What's the center state equation when it comes to disaster financing? Because this has been a source of controversy between center and states, especially opposition ruled states. If you look at the Disaster Management Act of 2005, it provides for the establishment of dedicated funds for disaster management. We have the NDRF, National Disaster Response Fund, and State Disaster Response Fund. The funds collected and distributed into these funds is primarily used for response operations. That is, during disaster, when the disaster is about to happen or when it has already occurred, when emergency relief operations are carried out, search and rescue operations, when relief material and aid material is supplied to the victims, that requires a lot of immediate funding, emergency contingency funding. So, funds for response operations is drawn from NDRF and SDRF. So, how it works is that through the union budget, allocations are made into the NDRF, right? A certain amount of fund is set aside into the NDRF, and based on recommendations of the Finance Commission, this is later distributed horizontally to the states, depending on the state's vulnerability, the kind of disasters they are dealing with. So, a lot of factors are considered by the Finance Ministry, Home Ministry, and based on Finance Commission recommendations, the funds will be disbursed to the states. But when it comes to disaster management, please understand that states have a primary role. States have a primary responsibility to deal with disasters, especially to provide response, to carry out emergency rescue and relief. So, states get support, financial support from the NDRF into SDRF. Other than that, states can raise their own finances as well into the SDRF through their local taxation. So, the center provides the big chunk of these funds, right, and this is proportionate to the size of a state, to the vulnerability of a state. Now, if the states run out of these funds, let's say a state like Uttarakhand or Kerala, which see multiple disasters in a year, if they run out of these funds, they can request the center for additional funding from NDRF. But this is left to the discretion of the center. The final decision whether to grant additional funds from NDRF to SDRF is left to the discretion of the center. There is a process which is followed according to the DM Act. When states request additional funding, when they say that there have been multiple disasters and SDRF funds are exhausted, the state can approach the center asking for additional funds either from NDRF or even from the PM's National Relief Fund, which is also a contingency fund to help out the victims of disasters. So, states can request the center for additional funding and the center will appoint an interministerial team. So, the central officials will visit the state, they will conduct a survey on the ground to see what is the impact of the disaster, to estimate the losses, to check whether state has fully utilized the existing funds, right. So, they will eventually come out with a report which is submitted to the Home Ministry, which is the nodal ministry for disaster management, and Home Ministry in consultation with Finance Ministry will decide whether additional funds have to be given or not. The law is very clear. The law says the center has the discretion to decide whether additional funds have to be given or not. But quite often, it's alleged that the discretion gets misused by the center, especially when politics enters into this issue. Opposition ruled states have a feeling that the central government is often discriminating against opposition ruled states. Kerala has raised this complaint from a long time that they don't get additional funds, whereas other states which are a priority for the center like Andhra Pradesh or even Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, which are electorally a priority for the ruling party at the center, have allegedly received more funds. When they have requested more funds from NDRF, they have been sanctioned the additional funds, but Kerala has been denied those additional funds according to the Kerala government. So, Kerala government has taken the matter to court and the Kerala High Court has issued a notice to the center asking the center to respond why there is a discrimination against Kerala, why funds are not being released as requested by the state government even after a committee report comprising of central officials, right, why the center has not released additional funds. So, this is the question which has come up, which is reported in this article. But just understand how the financing works. We also have National Disaster Mitigation Fund, which is provided under the DM Act. The center has recently set up a National Disaster Mitigation Fund, which will finance the state disaster mitigation funds. These funds will be used exclusively for mitigation efforts, that is in the pre-disaster phase, to plan and prepare and to mitigate the impact of a disaster. So, now let us look at an important editorial on page number 10 that deals with a horrific practice in our prisons. See, as you know, prisons are meant to be a place of reform. If you truly want to reform the criminals of the society, you need to provide for reformative justice, and the jails have to be a place where the criminals can be reformed and transformed into responsible citizens. But what is unfortunate is that the colonial legacy which has been left behind and the caste hierarchy which has led to centuries of oppression in the Indian society has unfortunately carried forward in our prisons. Recently, there was a landmark Supreme Court judgment. The Supreme Court has ruled caste-based discrimination in prisons, in prison management, is unconstitutional. It's violative of fundamental rights guaranteed under the Constitution. There have been several instances which have been reported, which have been well documented, that caste-based discrimination has been perpetuated in prisons. For example, untouchability or caste-based allocation of work within prisons. So such discriminatory practices have continued in our jails, which is a relic of our caste system, the social evil of India, and which is a relic of our legacy as well, right? And the colonial practice, the British encouraged the continuation of caste-based discrimination when it comes to the treatment of prisoners in jails. So let's understand this issue in slight detail. See, when it comes to prison management, this is again the responsibility of the state. Just like policing and law and order are state subjects, prison management is also a state subject. So states have a primary role to manage and reform the prisons. Prisons already face a lot of challenges. Most prisons are overcrowded because of the huge backlog of cases in the judiciary and the number of under trials who are put in jail, and the tendency of the prosecution to not allow bail, where bail is frequently denied. It has led to overcrowding of prisons. The backlog of cases, right, the inability of the judiciary to fast track and clear the cases, the general hesitation to grant bail, and how the prosecution keeps pushing against bail, and the overall inefficiency of the criminal justice system has led to overcrowding of prisons, leading to several challenges in prison management. It even leads to violation of human rights and fundamental rights of the prisoners. Even if they are convicted criminals, right, they do enjoy basic fundamental rights and constitutional rights. So in these prisons, it has been noticed that caste-based discrimination has been continuing in several prisons, and this has not been checked by the state governments. For example, in prisons, various works and tasks are allocated to the prisoners. This helps in managing the prison as well, and in a way it gives an opportunity for the criminals to transform, to reform. So prisoners are allocated various tasks like cleaning and sweeping, cleaning the toilets, cooking food, or stitching the clothes, or even livelihood opportunities are created inside prisons, from carpentry to handicrafts, etc. So different tasks are allocated to different prisoners. So this work allocation within prisons has often seen a caste-based allocation. See, if you look at the caste system, right, the so-called Varna system, there are those who defend the caste system. They say that in ancient India, right, the scriptures talk about a Varna system, a trade or job-based allocation, which was carried forward as a hereditary trade or a hereditary profession. They say that it was meant only for efficiency in the economy. But it is this model which eventually led to caste-based oppression, because it gives rise to a belief, a perception that some jobs are clean, some jobs are superior, whereas other jobs are inferior and unclean. For example, a task like cooking is seen as a more cleaner job. A task like cleaning is seen as a dirty job. So those associated with those menial tasks, they get excluded. They get treated as untouchables. So this is where the untouchability came into picture, leading to centuries of oppression of our Dalits, of the scheduled castes. So no one can deny the atrocities that have happened in the Indian society under the caste system, right? So when this continues, when work allocation is continued on the basis of caste, it perpetuates the discrimination and the untouchability which is prohibited under the Constitution. Is this clear? So in prisons, there have been well documented cases where jail officials were allocating tasks and works based on the caste of the person. Those from lower castes were given menial tasks like cleaning, sweeping, cleaning toilets. Those from higher castes were given better work opportunities, from cooking to being involved in other tasks which does not involve the so-called dirty work. This was clear caste-based discrimination which continues, which has perpetuated till today. So Supreme Court has stepped in with regard to petitions that were filed against such caste-based discrimination happening in our prisons. The Supreme Court has stepped in and passed a ruling, and it has prohibited these practices. It has held them to be unconstitutional because this goes against right to equality guaranteed under Article 14. It goes against the prohibition of untouchability. This is again a guaranteed fundamental right. It goes against the right to dignity seen as part of Article 21. It goes against right to be free from exploitative labor. These are guaranteed fundamental rights in the Constitution, and for such practices to be continuing in our jails, it's a grave travesty of justice, right? So prisoners have been subjected to such caste-based discrimination for decades in our prison system. That is why the Supreme Court has struck down these practices as unconstitutional. It has ordered the state governments which are responsible for prison management and the jail authorities to revise the manuals, the jail manuals, to ensure that such practices are not repeated. So this is a very welcome step, the Supreme Court stepping in and ordering the authorities to reform the way in which prisons are managed to ensure that fundamental rights, constitutionally guaranteed rights are upheld, is a very welcome step. So now it's up to the state governments and the concerned prison authorities to update and revise the jail manuals and ensure that such oppression, discrimination doesn't happen within the prisons. So that is what we take away from this editorial. So please take up a practice question based on this. So either under social issues or social justice or as part of polity. So GS1, GS2, you can expect a question on this topic. Caste-based discrimination in prisons is violative of constitutional rights. Discuss in the light of the recent Supreme Court judgment and make a strong case for prison reforms. So let's see how many of you can write an answer to this question. Next, we have another important editorial on page number 10 related to geography. It's related to the North-East Monsoon, which is all set to begin in India. We have just seen the retreat of the South-West Monsoon, and we are going to experience the arrival of North-East Monsoons. So any student of geography, right, would know the basics of South-West, North-East Monsoons. In India, South-West Monsoon is what brings majority of the rainfall. These South-West Monsoon winds, which flow in from the Arabian Sea, right, brings sufficient rainfall across peninsular India, northern and even northeastern parts of India, especially from the months of June all the way till September. This is what we refer to as the monsoon season in the country. And eventually the Southwest monsoons start retreating, they start withdrawing by September, October. So by October, Southwest monsoons would have retreated. But there are few parts in India which don't receive sufficient rainfall through the Southwest monsoons, especially this region right over here, the rain shadow area in Tamil Nadu, right, which is covered by the Western Ghats, and also parts of Andhra Pradesh, coastal Andhra Pradesh. These parts are not fully covered by the Southwest monsoons, leading to rainfall deficiency. So they are heavily dependent on the Northeast monsoons, which come in the month of October to November, or also what we call as post-monsoon rainfall seen in the months of October, November. These rains are absolutely critical for Tamil Nadu, interior Tamil Nadu, which is in the rain shadow area of Western Ghats, and coastal Andhra Pradesh. See, India is primarily an agrarian country. Our farmers still mainly depend on rainfall, monsoon rains for irrigation, right? So Southwest monsoons are absolutely critical, and this time the IMD had accurately predicted the forecast. It had predicted a above normal Southwest monsoon season and as per the prediction, we have received above normal rainfall on an average across the country, which is good news for India. But the North-East Monsoon, which comes in now, is also equally crucial to certain parts of the country, especially to parts of Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. So, most of Tamil Nadu depends on North-East Monsoon. If you take the total quantum of rainfall received in India, almost 11% of the annual rainfall is because of the North-East monsoons. North-East monsoon brings in 11% of India's annual rainfall. It's a very important fact for your prelims. The rest is brought in by the southwest and the retreating southwest monsoons. So, generally what has happened is that when it comes to forecasting and weather modeling, generally we have focused more on southwest monsoons given its significance for the economy and agriculture and water availability. There has been more attention given to southwest monsoons and studying the phenomena, developing better weather forecasting models for southwest monsoons. Generally, northeast monsoons have been ignored and neglected. In the past at least, northeast monsoons wouldn't get much of scientific priority as far as understanding the phenomena was concerned and as far as developing weather forecasting models was concerned. The main focus and attention was always on southwest monsoons. So, this had limited our understanding of northeast monsoons. But of late, IMD has improved its weather forecasting capabilities even with regard to northeast monsoons. Because the northeast monsoons are absolutely crucial for agriculture in Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. These areas are very crucial for rice cultivation, maize cultivation. Both the states are leading producers of rice, maize and other agricultural crops, and all these crops are dependent on the rainfall brought in by the northeast monsoons because they don't get enough rainfall from the southwest monsoons. So, the IMD has prioritized early warning and forecasting for northeast monsoons as well. But the editorial is urging the IMD and the governments to give equal priority to northeast monsoons as well. Just like we pay more attention to southwest monsoons, right? Even the northeast monsoons bring only 11% rainfall to the country. It is the lifeline of Tamil Nadu and coastal Andhra. It's the lifeline of the farmers present here, which has a huge impact on India's final agricultural productivity. So, the editorial is urging the authorities, especially IMD, to focus on developing even better forecasting models and give equal priority to understanding northeast monsoons as well, just like we prioritize southwest monsoons. So, this year there is some positive news for India. Studies have shown that a La Nina phenomena is forming in the central equatorial Pacific. La Nina is a phenomena where the waters in central equatorial Pacific between Australia and Peru sees a reduction in the sea surface temperature. There is a cooling of the waters. This is very favorable for Indian monsoons. So, above normal rainfall is expected. The southwest monsoon has already shown that, and even in northeast monsoons, IMD has given a above normal prediction, which is good for the rain shadow area of Tamil Nadu and coastal Andhra Pradesh. So, that is what we learn from this article. The main point over here is that IMD should give more priority to northeast monsoons as well. It should give equal attention as it gives to southwest monsoon as far as forecasting is concerned. Now, let us look at a few small articles which are important for both mains and prelims. On page 13, we have an article related to India-Sri Lanka relations. As you all know, Sri Lanka recently went through presidential elections and it has got a new leader, Anura Dissanayake from the JVP party. The JVP is a very controversial political organization in Sri Lanka. So, its leader has got a conclusive mandate by the people, right, and its leader has emerged as the president. The JVP is a leftist Marxist party which has been often known for its position against India or against Indian interests. Historically, this organization was aligned with left-wing extremist ideology such as Maoism. When the JVP was founded in 1950s, 1960s, initially it followed the path of Maoism, Leninism, and even committed brutal political violence and atrocities in Sri Lanka in the 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s. So, at one point, it was an extremist organization engaged in political killings. Historically, it has taken a position against India's role in supporting the Tamil minorities. The party has often taken a stand against Tamil rights. So that is something that bothers India, that concerns India. So later, the party entered mainstream politics. It transformed from being an extremist militant organization and turned into a Marxist political outfit. But still, its ideology, its policies, and its position on India and the Tamil community is something that bothers India. India has often been concerned about this. If you look at the JVP and its leader, who has become the president of the country, he has publicly spoken against the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment was the bedrock of the India-Sri Lanka Peace Accord of 1987, when the Rajiv Gandhi government made an attempt to end the ethnic war in the country and secure the rights of the Tamils in northern and eastern provinces. Through this, India convinced LTT to surrender. We convinced Sri Lanka to implement the 13th Constitutional Amendment so that provincial councils could be created, autonomous councils in northern and eastern provinces, and the Tamils could have their own autonomous political rights with devolution of power. And the Tamil language would be given equal status and recognition. Though Sri Lanka implemented the 13th Amendment, it has only been a partial implementation. Tamil language was given equal status and recognition. Provincial autonomous councils were created. But however, all the key subjects have not been devolved. Important subjects like land, police, law and order, they have been retained with the central government in Sri Lanka, with the autonomous councils having very limited administrative powers. And also frequent elections are not held to these provincial councils. So this has been a concern for India, and one of our long-standing demand is to provide for full implementation of 13th Amendment. India keeps urging Sri Lanka even today to fully implement 13th Amendment, but the JVP and its leader Anura Dissanayake has often taken a stand against it. When it comes to other important issues, such as the fishermen issue, for example, where fishermen from Tamil Nadu are blamed for crossing into Sri Lankan waters and poaching illegally in Sri Lankan waters. Quite often, Sri Lankan authorities detain or arrest them. They open fire and sometimes injure and kill Indian fishermen as well. This becomes a sensitive issue in Tamil Nadu. We have not been able to find a permanent solution to the fishermen issue. But the JVP and its leader, Anura Dissanayake, have spoken against the issue, and they have blamed the entire problem on fishermen from Tamil Nadu. While that is true, it is fishermen from Tamil Nadu who are crossing into Sri Lankan waters. The aggressive approach towards dealing with the issue is what affects India. India wants a more moderate approach when it comes to dealing with the fishermen. But the generally seen aggressive approach of Sri Lanka is a problem, and JVP believes that it should act against these fishermen, and that is something that concerns India. Even with regard to Indian projects, India has taken up strategic projects in Sri Lanka. For example, the clean energy projects in northern Sri Lanka, which has been awarded to India's Adani Power. But the JVP during the election campaign accused the Modi government and the then Sri Lankan government of a corrupt deal in which a corrupt contract was given to Adani Group, according to the Sri Lankan leadership. So this is what worries India. The position that the JVP has taken, its leader has taken against India and Indian interests, is something that worries India. The JVP even doesn't support investigation into allegation of war crimes that occurred during the last phase of the civil war under the Rajpaksa government. India insists that war crimes have to be investigated. There should be an independent investigation to secure justice for the Tamils. But JVP opposes that. This has been the historical position of the party, leading to friction between India and the JVP. But however, we should not be guided just by the differences. Now that there is a new government, a new leader, it is important for India to engage with them and work with them. Because JVP has popular support, the masses have supported Anura Dissanayake. Because as you all know, Sri Lanka went through a devastating economic crisis from 2022. The crisis was largely blamed on the economic mismanagement by previous governments, especially the Rajapaksa governments. India stepped in and assisted the country with almost $4 billion worth of economic assistance, right? So Sri Lanka is slowly recovering with support from IMF, India, Japan and others. But JVP was the one which worked at the ground level during the economic crisis. The party has built popular support by encouraging the people, supporting them during the crisis, and by channeling their anger, their resentment into popular support for the party. This election which happened just 2 weeks ago is essentially a vote of Sri Lankan citizens against the mainstream parties and mainstream leaders who are held responsible for the economic crisis. It's a vote for the leadership of Anura Dissanayake and the JVP, which has worked at the grassroots level during the crisis period, which means it's a popular government. The leader is a popular leader. So it doesn't matter whether we have differences with the party and the leadership and their ideological position. We should learn to work with them, and that is exactly what India has done. Within days of the results coming out, India's Foreign Minister Jaishankar has visited the country. India has become the first major country to visit and meet the newly elected president, and Jaishankar has conveyed India's best wishes for the new president, and India has said we look forward to working with Sri Lanka. So this is a good course correction, because you can't allow these differences to affect the broader relationship, right? We can't determine who will lead a country, who will win the elections. That would be constituted as interference in the internal matters of another country. We can't rely on one party, one leader to support our interests all the time, right? We have seen how it backfires in Bangladesh, in Nepal, in Maldives. Whenever there's a change in government, India loses influence and we see the rise of anti-India sentiments. So this is a course correction India has been making. We are trying to ensure that we have good equations with all parties and leaders in other countries, irrespective of their ideologies and their positions. So this is a very pragmatic approach by the government, and the foreign minister has even extended an invite to the Sri Lankan president to come to India. So let's see how this relationship will progress in the coming days. Next, we have another important update related to Naxalism or left-wing extremism. Yesterday, a major counter-insurgency operation took place in Chhattisgarh. See, currently, Chhattisgarh remains one of the hotbeds of Naxal activity, especially areas like Bastar, Dantewad, Bijapur. These districts are the last remaining hotspots of Naxalism, because Naxalism is clearly on the decline. According to data from Home Ministry, we have seen a significant decline in Naxal activity post 2010. Is that clear? The influence of Naxals, the number of districts which was under Naxal influence, the number of killings, overall we have seen a big decline in these numbers. It's a success of the development approach that India has adopted to address the governance related problems in the tribal rural belts of the country, in the forested belts of the country, and it's a success of the security operations, the intelligence based security operations. So India has managed to take out the top leaders, the mid commanders of the CPI Maoist, which has been leading this war against the Indian state. With the elimination of the leadership, with curbing of the terror financing routes, Naxal activity has been significantly curbed, plus with good development, better governance, better connectivity across these affected areas in central eastern India, we have seen a major decline in Naxalism. In fact, in this year alone, since the start of 2024, before yesterday, 159 Naxals had already been killed by security forces, especially in Chhattisgarh, Odisha and the other central and eastern parts of India. So now, in this operation that took place the other day in the Bastar Dantewad region, 28 Naxals have been eliminated by the security forces in a counter-insurgency operation. So these major operations which have been mounted, which have been successful, right? It has played a big role in further weakening Naxal presence and influence. Is this clear? So in this year, more than 180 plus Naxals have been killed by security forces. On the ground, governance and development has seen a big improvement over the last 15 years. Naxal presence and influence has gone down significantly. Naxal related violence has gone down significantly. So it almost appears that India is on the brink of eliminating Naxalism or left-wing extremism. It may take few more years of effort, but to defeat a strong ideological movement like Maoism, which is a type of left-wing extremism, or as we call it, Naxalism in India, to defeat such a strong ideological movement, you need to address the root causes which triggered the movement in the first place. The lack of development, lack of governance in the tribal belt, in the forested belt, in the rural areas is what created a base for Maoism, right, which took the shape of Naxalism in India as it originated at Naxalbari village in West Bengal. So today India has done much better with regard to the developmental issues, and with improved security operations, Naxal activity has seen a big decline. But to eliminate and wipe out the threat, we need to tackle the root causes. The development related issues have to be fully addressed, be it the land related factors, be it the injustice or the perceived sense of injustice that communities have felt because of government policies, or how communities have been affected because of government corruption or the lack of government welfare. These issues, including tribal rights, they all have to be addressed, and if that is done, we can definitely wipe out Naxalism. India is almost heading towards bringing an end to Naxalism. We have seen significant improvement. The data shows that, the data proves that Naxalism is on the decline, and with the right push and the right strategy, maybe in few years, maybe in a decade, it could be possible to eliminate Naxalism. But at the same time, we can't be complacent, because Naxals have shown the ability to regroup and revive the activities. Even in 1990s, the then Maoist groups had been decimated and weakened. The People's War Group, or PWG, and MCCI, Maoist Communist Center of India, they had been weakened through security operations. But since we never addressed the root causes, these groups, they united, they came together to form the CPI Maoist, right? They formed a strategic alliance to form the CPI Maoist in 2004, and since then it became a notorious extremist organization. India has even designated the outfit as a terrorist organization under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, even though technically it's an insurgent group. So it shows that Maoists can easily regroup and revive because they believe in a protracted war. Mao Zedong, right, of the Communist Party of China, who laid down the foundation of Maoism, urged the Maoists to be prepared for a protracted conflict, if required to take a back step, to regroup and then revive. So we can't be complacent, we can't presume that Naxalism will be defeated or Naxalism is getting eliminated. It is on the decline for sure, the data shows that, but there are still few hotspots left, like Malkangiri in Odisha, Bastar, Dantewad, Bijapur in Chhattisgarh, right? So there are few pockets which have to be tackled, and India is on the right path, right, as seen in this operation yesterday. Next, in another update, Jaishankar is all set to visit Pakistan, making it a historic visit, because it's been more than a decade since an Indian leader stepped foot in Pakistan. See, after the Uri terror attacks of 2016, India has cut down the relations with Pakistan. We boycotted the SAARC summit that year. India retaliated as well with a surgical strike, and especially after Pulwama attacks of 2019. India not only retaliated with the Balkot airstrikes, but India downgraded the relations. We stopped the trade, we stopped all the friendly initiatives, and we stopped engaging with Pakistan entirely. We even sidelined the SAARC grouping in order to sideline Pakistan. So no Indian leader has visited after 2015. In fact, the last Indian leader to visit Pakistan, to land in Pakistan, was Sushma Swaraj, the then foreign minister, in 2015. So now Pakistan is hosting the SCO heads of government meeting. SCO, as you know, is an important regional group focused on Eurasia, Central Asia. It was initially formed in 96 as the Shanghai Five. The major Central Asian Eurasian powers, Russia, China, they formed the organization with few Central Asian countries like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. These 5 countries formed the Shanghai Five in 1996. Later, in 2001, it was transformed into SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, with the inclusion of Uzbekistan. And over the years, new members have joined. India, Pakistan were also added as full members at the Astana summit in 2017. And recently, Iran and Belarus have also been given membership, and they have also completed the process of joining the SCO. Iran completed the joining process last year, becoming the 9th member of SCO. Belarus has recently completed the joining process. Just a few months ago, Belarus has also become a member of SCO. So 10 important countries of the Eurasia, Central Asia region and South Asia region are part of this grouping. So just because we have bilateral issues with Pakistan, we can't sideline an important group like SCO. So that is why India has taken a balanced decision that foreign minister will visit Pakistan, will attend the SCO summit, but however, we will not have any bilateral meetings with Pakistan. See, last year when India hosted the SCO meeting in Goa, foreign ministers meeting was held in India. Pakistan sent its foreign minister. Pakistan's foreign minister visited India, but we didn't have any bilateral interaction. It was only part of the regional grouping, that is the SCO interaction. So India will continue with that spirit. We don't want SCO to suffer. It's a very critical group. India gives a lot of priority to the SCO. So even though it's being hosted in Pakistan, even though we have tensions and a problematic relationship, India has still chosen to attend the event. Foreign minister will represent India, take part in the SCO meeting, but there will be no bilateral interaction with Pakistan. So that is what we learned from this update. So we need to watch how India-Pakistan relations will develop and what happens at the SCO summit. Next, on page 15, there's an article related to India-US relations. India and United States have signed a bilateral agreement on critical minerals. As you all know, critical strategic minerals have become extremely crucial for the current economy and the future economy. As we shift towards clean renewable energy, critical minerals like lithium, nickel, cobalt, right, they play a very crucial role in batteries, in battery technology. And there are many other critical strategic minerals which have an important application in industries, in space and defense and aerospace, right, thus giving it a strategic perspective as well. So India, US are trying to diversify the global supply chains, because currently most of the supply chains of critical strategic minerals is controlled by China. China dominates the supply chains, right from mining to processing to exports. The supply chain of critical strategic minerals is largely monopolized by China. So countries like India, US and others are trying to reduce the dependency on China by diversifying the supply chains. So India, US are already part of a partnership called Mineral Security Partnership. It's a multilateral initiative started by the US, where American allies like Australia, Japan, European countries, they're all part of the initiative. And even India has joined the initiative last year. In 2023, when PM Modi visited US, India had already joined the Mineral Security Partnership. It's a multilateral initiative to diversify critical mineral supply chain. But for the first time, India and US have signed a bilateral agreement on critical minerals. So bilaterally as well, India, US will work together to diversify critical mineral sourcing. They will look at other third countries in Africa, in South America, like Argentina, Bolivia, etc., which are known to hold massive reserves of lithium and other critical minerals. So this is an important deal because we have signed such a deal with only Australia. India, Australia have a critical mineral security partnership. Australia is also home to critical mineral reserves. It can be a reliable supplier of critical minerals to India. So Australia is the only country with which we had a bilateral agreement on critical minerals, right? But we are working with others. We are planning to work with Japan, with Argentina. We have struck a deal, right? India has recently secured a mine in Argentina. So India is making a lot of efforts to secure the supplies of critical minerals to reduce dependency on China. So now this deal with US is very significant. It marks a significant progress in India-US relations as well. Now, can you find out which is the lithium mine that India has secured in Argentina? That's a small assignment for you. Find out the location of this lithium mine in Argentina, which has been secured by an Indian company. So please find that out and mention that in the comments. Next, on page 16, we have an article related to Russia's relations with Taliban. See, one would never imagine Russia to have good ties with Taliban, because if you look at the history of Afghanistan, the history of the Afghan conflict, The Soviet Union invaded the country in 1979, which eventually led to the rise of the Afghan Mujahideen, when the Pashtun community of Afghanistan rose up in resistance against the occupying Soviet forces in 1980s. These Mujahideen fighters were supported by Pakistan, United States and its allies as part of the covert war to target the Soviet forces which occupied Afghanistan back then. The Mujahideen would eventually push the Soviet forces out by 1989. And by 1990s, the Taliban was formed, which was a byproduct of the Afghan Mujahideen. When several warlords and Mujahideen fighters were fighting for power in Afghanistan in 1990s after the retreat of the Soviets, it was the young radical student leaders of the Mujahideen who went on to form the Taliban, which is the Pashtun dominated outfit. Eventually, Taliban would capture power in 1996 before it was toppled by the United States after the 9/11 attacks. And now the Taliban is back in power in 2021 after it threw out the Afghan government after the retreat of the American troops. So one would naturally presume that Russia Taliban would not see eye to eye, because Russia is the successor state of Soviet Union. Taliban is in a way a byproduct of the Afghan Mujahideen. In fact, there's something very interesting. Back in 1990s, when Taliban had formed the government in 96, Russia had worked with India and Iran to counter the Taliban. These three countries saw Taliban as a threat. Naturally, India saw Taliban as a threat given its close connections with Pakistan's ISI and how it was nurturing anti-India terrorist groups like Lashkar and other terrorist organizations. Iran saw Taliban as a threat because Iran, being a Shia radical conservative state, would see a Sunni radical outfit as a threat because of the sectarian divisions. Russia obviously saw Taliban as a threat for obvious reasons. So in late 1990s, Russia, India, Iran worked together to counter the Taliban by sponsoring the Northern Alliance. This is how Russia saw Taliban at one point. But today things have changed. Today Russia has become more pragmatic. Russia has important economic strategic interests to protect in Afghanistan and Central Asia region, and it is looking to engage with the Taliban. There are reports that Russia might recognize the Taliban government. See, until now Russia has recognized Taliban as a terrorist organization. Russia has officially designated Taliban as a terrorist outfit. But it is moving towards giving recognition to Taliban, and it has urged the Western countries to lift the economic sanctions on Afghanistan. Since 2021, Afghanistan has been brought under sanctions through the United Nations and Financial Action Task Force. Ever since Taliban recaptured the country and threw out the Afghan government, all the financial assets of the Afghan government that were abroad have been frozen, and there are strict economic sanctions on the Taliban regime. Most countries don't recognize the Taliban government. But Russia is moving towards giving that recognition. Russia has been engaging with Taliban for several years. So it has urged the Western countries to lift the sanctions so Afghanistan can be reconstructed. So this is a very interesting phase of the geopolitics in Afghanistan. If Russia were to recognize Taliban and lift the terrorist tag and build relations with Taliban, that would be something which is unprecedented. So let's see whether this will happen or not. Now, coming to the end of the session, we have a couple of small articles for your prelims. On page 1 and 8, there is an article referring to PM KISAN, a very important government scheme. The article says PM Modi is going to release the next installment of funds under PM KISAN in Maharashtra. So what is PM KISAN? It's a central sector scheme, meaning it's 100% funded by the center. 100% funding comes from the central government, and it provides direct cash support to farmers. This scheme was launched in 2018 as a flagship initiative of the Modi government. Under this, 6,000 rupees in cash is provided in 3 equal installments. So basically, once in 4 months, eligible farmers will get 2,000 rupees So in a year, they will get direct cash support of 6,000 rupees. This is meant to benefit farmers who are land holding farmers, who are engaged in agricultural activities, and mainly benefit small and marginal farmers. Most farmers in India are small and marginal. They hold very small parcels of land, right? They practice subsistence agriculture. So they would need additional support because agriculture in itself is a very risky profession. Given the uncertainties and the insecurity of livelihood and income that farmers suffer from, the government has launched this ambitious scheme, and every 4 months the installment amount is released, which has been benefiting the farmers. So it's a direct cash benefit given through the DBT system, the direct benefit transfer, where the money is transferred directly into the bank accounts of the beneficiaries, which is linked with their Aadhaar and their mobile phones. To ensure that there is no leakage or no diversion of the funds, direct benefit transfer is used, and it is implemented by the Ministry of Agriculture. These are the basic facts you need to know about PM KISAN to answer any prelims question. Coming to the last article, the WHO has approved one of the first diagnostic test kits for monkeypox. As you know, Mpox, which has broken out in Africa and in several countries, has triggered a global scare. WHO has already recognized it as a public health emergency, right? It has the potential to turn into an epidemic, a pandemic. So given how it can spread and the deadly fatal condition it can cause, there is a lot of focus on developing treatments, vaccines, and even diagnostics to detect Mpox and treat Mpox and maybe even prevent Mpox. So recently, Abbott Pharmaceuticals, a major pharma company, has developed a quick diagnostic tool. It has developed a quick reaction diagnostic tool which can be used for quick results to accurately diagnose the infection. So this diagnostic kit has been approved by the WHO. It's called the Alinity MPXV assay. Now, what is unique is about the way in which the diagnosis works. See, when a person is infected with Mpox, it leads to these lesions on the skin. It leads to these breakouts on the skin, right, from which fluids will start pouring out. So from these lesions on the skin, you can take a cotton swab, just take the sample and put it into the test kit, and this is enough, and within a minute you will have your results. So those who have the symptoms of Mpox, those who are having these visible signs of Mpox, when such lesions are breaking out, a quick test can be conducted by using this test kit, which is one of the first in the world, one of its kind in the world, to provide for quick and accurate results. So this will go a long way in the fight against containing Mpox. WHO has approved the diagnostic kit, and it will be rolled out in the focus countries. So please read a little more about Mpox. We have covered this sufficient number of times. We have explained what causes Mpox, what are the symptoms, and how does the disease progress. So kindly revise this, read this again, and you can take that as a homework as well. So on this note, I would like to conclude my discussion for today. I hope it's been a fruitful session. We have covered 11 important articles so that you don't have to go and read the newspaper again. So do let me know what you think. If you like the session, do press the like button and do comment below as well, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Have a good day.